20 years ago, I lived in a tiny, secluded town on the edge of rural Montana. It was so far removed from the modern world that it felt like a place suspended in time, where everyone held onto ancient legends passed down through countless generations. Life there was straightforward, much quieter than the constant noise of the cities, and sometimes it felt almost magical. We held festivals every few weeks, vibrant celebrations that drew in folk musicians, traditional storytellers, and traveling merchants. These events were a tribute to our lives, our community, and our heritage. We would laugh, sing, and engage in the timeless games our ancestors had taught us. As night fell, beneath a blanket of sparkling stars, the town elders would recount stories, narratives from old Montana folklore, tales of love, faith, and courage. I grew up with only one other kid my age, and her name was Jessica. Our town was so remote that we spent nearly every moment together. We'd hike to school, a lengthy journey that took us over barren hills and along narrow, winding trails. Sometimes we'd talk about the stories we heard from the elders, imagining ourselves as the heroes or heroines of old, battling mythical creatures and supernatural forces. But there was one thing the elders warned us about more than anything else: the dark woods. The forest that stretched beyond the town was strictly off-limits. It was dense and twisted, tangled with roots and shadows that seemed to grow darker the deeper you ventured. They said an old woman lived there, someone no one had seen in years. The elders would exchange worried glances, their faces tightening with a fear they rarely showed, and they'd caution, "Stay away from the dark woods. She keeps to herself, but her presence is a bad omen. If you happen to see her, don't let her touch you." Of course, we were just kids, so we respected our elders' warnings, but in a town with limited entertainment, there was only so much we could do. We did our best to avoid the dark woods even after coming home from school. Instead, we ended up playing board games outside in the community hall all night long while our elders enjoyed folk music together. "Do you want to explore it?" Jessica asked me one afternoon, her eyes wide with curiosity. "No way! Dad has forbidden us," I replied firmly. "Don't be such a scaredy cat," she teased, trying to entice me into breaking the rule. Suddenly, a heavy rain began to pour, forcing everyone to seek shelter indoors. We said our goodbyes and went to bed, the sound of the storm lulling us into uneasy sleep. The next morning, the sky was clear, but the day was unusually windy. I had planned to skip school, but the sound of Jessica outside my window tempted me to join her. When we walked to school, we discovered it had been closed due to last night's heavy rain, so we had to find our way back home. The sky had darkened considerably. I could tell a storm was brewing. Most of the paths leading back to our town were flooded, making the return trip difficult. That's when I felt Jessica tugging at my arm. "I think we have to go through the dark woods," she insisted. "No way, you know Grandpa would be upset," I protested. "Well, it's either that or we get stuck here. What do you think?" she argued. She was always a bit stubborn, but she had a point. I figured Grandpa would understand, right? The sky hung heavy with oppressive darkness, clouds swirling and roiling like a tumultuous ocean. The air was thick with the earthy scent of wet soil, as if the very ground was holding its breath. Each gust of wind sent chills down my spine. The coldness settled into my bones, an unsettling chill that seeped deep, making me feel as though the very essence of life was being drained from me. As we ventured deeper into the dark woods, the trees loomed ominously above us, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands clawing at the sky. "What if we see her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't let her touch you, or she'll curse you," Jessica teased, trying to lighten the mood. The leaves rustled uneasily beneath our feet, and the shadows seemed to press in around us. We heard a branch snap somewhere in the distance, and then we saw her. The old woman. She stood by the path, a hunched, withered figure draped in tattered garments. Her skin hung loosely from her bones, gray and cracked like ancient parchment, and her eyes, they were milky white, as if she'd been blind for centuries. She looked directly at us. No, she saw us, in a way that felt like it pierced through our very souls. "Are you from the town?" she asked, her voice as dry and harsh as the desert wind. I remember my throat tightening, words stuck in my mouth like glue. Jessica nodded, too frightened to speak. The woman's cracked lips twisted into something resembling a smile. "Be careful," she rasped. "A plague is coming to your town. Stay away from the water." I tried to brush her off, laugh it away like the foolish child I was. But when I glanced at Jessica, her face had turned pale, white as a ghost. Her lips trembled, and before I could even respond, she grabbed my arm and we bolted. We ran, the sound of our footsteps and the rain splashing through the mud, until we reached the safety of the town. "What happened?" I asked Jessica. "Why did we run?" "That old woman, she's supposed to be dead for centuries. She shouldn't exist." "It must have been someone playing a prank on us. We shouldn't have run." "Don't talk about this with anyone else. Promise me." "Don't be ridiculous." "I said, promise me," she yelled. "I promise," I replied. We never spoke of it again, not for a long time. But things began to change after that. Strange things started happening. The air around the town felt heavier, thicker. Jessica was the first to shut herself away. She stopped coming to school, stopped leaving her house altogether. When I asked her why, all she would say was, "I saw her. I felt her. She touched me. She has cursed me." I didn't believe her. I refused to accept it. But then she fell ill. It started with a fever, then boils, dark, festering sores that erupted across her skin. She had a terrible fever for days, until one day she vomited blood, stood up, and collapsed right on the floor. It didn't stop with her. The illness spread. First, a few people fell sick, then more, until the entire town was stricken. No one could explain it, no doctor, no healer. The elders whispered that the old woman had returned to bring a curse, to punish us for trespassing into her forest. I heard them speak of it in hushed tones, but it wasn't just talk anymore. It was real. The plague consumed the town, taking everyone it could, including my parents. The town became nothing but a graveyard, the ground scattered with blood and disease-ridden bodies. I was the only one left alone. Why was I left behind? I had to leave. I had to escape. I had no choice. When I finally left, the land had turned barren. Eventually, the town itself faded from memory, swallowed by time and the relentless winds of the plains. I didn't dare go back. No one could. It was a cursed place. A place that didn't exist to me anymore. I moved to the city and built a life for myself, something I never thought I'd be able to do after everything I'd experienced. I got married, started a family. My wife, my children, they became my world. And the town became a distant, shadowy memory. I told myself the curse had stayed behind, buried with the dead. The old woman had touched Jessica. Maybe that's why I was spared from her curse. But last night, she returned. It began with a dream. At least, I thought it was a dream. I woke to find Jessica standing in my bedroom, her figure barely visible in the dark, just a shadow against the wall. My heart raced, my mind screaming that it couldn't be real. She was dead, long gone, buried in that forsaken town. But there she was, and I knew deep down that it wasn't a dream. She whispered, "You survived before, but not anymore. Please don't touch me." I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed with fear. I wanted to shout, to wake my wife, but I couldn't. I woke up drenched in a cold sweat the next morning, thanking God that it had all been nothing but a nightmare. I brewed my coffee and told my kids they could skip school today. I would take them to the zoo. "Why?" they asked. "Every day is a blessing. Don't forget, darling," I replied. The kids roared with excitement, and we smiled from ear to ear. I decided I would go into work that day and take an early leave. I had some unfinished tasks to attend to. I clocked into work and went straight to my desk to pick up some papers. That's when I heard my phone ring. It was my wife. "Baby, please come home quickly. It's our daughter. She's vomiting blood."